Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on adding in our logic for allowing our monsters to level up. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up, so let's get started. So now that we have our core logic in place for leveling and gaining experience, we have two other things we need to do before we round out our feature. The first one is tied to our experience bar. So previously when our monster levels up, it would go ahead and animate backwards down to the value it should be. We're going to go ahead and update this to have it animate all the way to be full, wait a second, and then go ahead and animate up to the value it should be. And then that way gives more of the impression that the monsters actually level up to where they should be. The next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and fix our logic tied to multiple monsters in our party and them gaining experience. We're just going to go ahead and get that logic in place for our next section of videos. So we're going to get started. What we'll do is let's jump over to our monsters JSON file. We're going to go ahead and bump up our starting monsters experience so that way it's a little bit closer to leveling up so it's easier to test. So we're going to do 200. Then let's go ahead and jump over to our preload scene and let's go ahead and start our battle scene right away so we can test. So we're going to go ahead and start with our EXP bar. So let's jump into our player battle monster. Let's go ahead and jump down to our update monster EXP bar method. And so what we're going to want to do in this method is we'll need to know if our monster actually levels up. And if so, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and animate our bar to be 100%. And then we'll go ahead and reset it back to 0. And then we'll do our existing logic for calculating EXP so we can go from 0 to the value it should be at right now. If the monster didn't level up, then we're just going to go ahead and do the same logic that we currently have since it'll work. So what we'll do is the first thing we need to do is we're going to add a new argument so we know if our monster actually leveled up. I'm just going to do leveled up. And then real quick for our type, we're just going to go ahead and copy this. Go ahead and paste that in. So this is just going to go ahead and be a Boolean. So we'll go ahead and change this. All right, so then what we'll do is let's go ahead and just do our if statement. We're going to check to see if we leveled up. So if we leveled up, what we're going to want to do is we'll do the same logic here. So let's just copy this block of code for a second. We'll go ahead and paste it. And we want to go ahead and return so we don't run the code down below it. So when we level up, what we want to do is we want to do this logic here. We set our animation. So we're just going to copy this piece and we'll go ahead and paste that. And so for our animation, what we want to go ahead and do is we want to go to 100%. So we actually want to go to 1. And then when that happens, we'll want to go ahead and do our callback. And then in this callback, what we're going to want to do is we want to go ahead and wait just a small period of time. And then we want to go ahead and reset it back down to 0. And so go ahead and wait. We'll just go ahead and use our delayed call from Phaser. So we'll do this. We'll do our scene. We'll go ahead and grab our time for our time plugin. And then we'll go ahead and do delayed call. And we're just going to go ahead and do 500 milliseconds. So it's not too long. And then for this, we want to go ahead and have our callback. And so inside here, we basically just want to go ahead and reset this back to 0. So we're just going to copy this. We'll go ahead and paste it. And what we'll want to do is we want to go to 0, but we don't want this to be animated. So we're just going to go ahead and set our option for skipping our battle animation, and we're going to go ahead and set that to true. Right after we do that, now we want to go ahead and run all of this logic right here. So then that way we actually have our proper animation. And so we'll go ahead and paste that inside here. And so our code's a little bit duplicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this logic here for this callback to be into a separate variable so we can reuse it in both locations. So to go ahead and do this, we'll just make a new variable outside this. We'll just do const, we'll do cb will be equal to, and then we'll copy our callback here, and we'll go ahead and paste it. So now what we can do is we can just replace this whole set of logic here with our new variable, so cb. And then down here, we'll go ahead and do the same thing. So we'll have our callback, and we'll just do cb. So now to use our new functionality, we need to go ahead and jump over to our battle scene. And what we'll want to do is we'll come down to where we handle our experience in our state. And so when we call update monster exp bar, we'll need to know if our monster actually leveled up. So we'll need to add a variable to keep track of that. So what we'll do is we'll come outside our loop where we create our messages. And so right after we create our messages, we'll just make a new variable, do let did active monster level up. We're going to set that equal to false. And then what we'll want to do is down here where we check to see if our active player monster gained experience, we'll go ahead and just add a check to see if our stat changes have our level up. So if our stat changes dot level does not equal 0, then we want to go ahead and set this equal to true. So then what we can do down here is just, we'll go ahead and add that new argument, and we'll go ahead and just do did active monster level up. All right, so to go ahead and test, what we're going to do is let's jump over to our monsters JSON file. I forgot to bump up our current attack to be 25, so we can easily knock out our monster. So let's fix that. So let's jump over to our preload scene. Let's jump into our title scene real quick. We're just going to start a new game so we can reset our monster's data. And so we'll go ahead and just save. And now what we'll do is back in our preload scene, let's switch back to our battle scene. Now when our scene starts, we should be able to go ahead and battle. Our monster should be close to leveling up. And so if we go ahead and fight, we should knock out the enemy monster. Now we see we get our experience, we fill up our bar, and now we go ahead and bump it up to where it should be. And then real quick, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to go ahead and save. And we're going to go ahead and do and restart our scene. So then that way we can just test the other flow where we don't level up. Go ahead and fight real quick. Our monster should be level 6. We have our EXP bar. We see we didn't level up, and so now we just animate it up to where it should be. Alright, so for our next set of changes, what we'll do is let's jump over to our battle scene. And what we're going to want to do is, I'm going to go ahead and refactor our logic tied to our messages that we're showing to our player. So currently, we just show the messages in the order that our monsters are in our party. And what would make more sense is because our active monster is the one that's shown to the player currently, we're going to go ahead and have those messages show first. So then that way our current active monster will be the one leveling up. We can do our animations. And then everything else will be about the monsters that are in our party that gain experience and or level up. And so to make this change, all we need to do is we just need to keep track of which messages are tied to our active monster versus the messages that are not tied to our active monster. So then that way we can push those messages that are tied to our monster to the beginning of our array. And so to go ahead and keep track of this, what we'll do is we're going to introduce a new variable. So after our stat changes, we're just going to add a new messages array. So we're just going to copy this. Let's go ahead and paste it. And we're going to go ahead and do monster messages. And then what we'll do is when we add our messages, we're just going to put it into this temporary array here. And so we'll have our messages tied to our active monster and our messages tied to our non-active monster. Then we'll also want to go ahead and do the same thing down here when we have our stat changes. So then once we do those changes, what we'll go ahead and do is outside of our block statement here, we're just going to go ahead and check to see if it was our active monster, and if it was, we'll push these messages to the beginning of our array, otherwise we'll push them to our end. So to do that check, I'm just going to go ahead and copy our line of code here. We check to see if our index is equal to our active player index. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and do our other code. So if it is tied to our active monster, what we'll want to do is reference our messages array, and we'll use the unshift method to go ahead and add these to the beginning of the array. And so let's go ahead and copy our elements from our monster messages array. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll just do our messages. We'll use our push method to go ahead and add them to the end of our array. And we'll do the same thing where we copy our elements from this temporary array. All right, and so our next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and modify our logic for while we're looping through our monsters. So currently we loop through all of the monsters in our party and all of them will gain experience. However, typically in these games, if your monster is knocked out, they wouldn't actually gain experience from the shared EXP. And so we're just going to go ahead and do a similar check here. So if our monster's HP is where they're knocked out, we won't actually give them experience. And so for that check, we'll just do an if statement. We'll do if our scene data. We want to go ahead and grab our player's monsters and then grab a reference to our current index in our loop. And if the current HP is less than or equal to 0, then we want to go ahead and just return, so that way we continue through our loop, and we'll go ahead and process our next monster. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and address our to-do here before we handle our experience for our other monsters. So what we need to do is basically, we need to do the same logic that we're doing inside here in our update monster exp method for our player battle monster. And so what we want to go ahead and do is we just need to pass our monster object to our utils for doing our stat updates to our monster. And then that way we'll update our underlying data and we'll save it in our data manager. And so to go ahead and do that, we're just going to go ahead and do stat changes. We'll set it equal to our handle monster gaining experience. And so then we'll go ahead and pass in our monsters. We'll do this. We'll do our scene data. We'll go ahead and pass in our player monsters. And we'll go ahead and pass in our index. And then we want to go ahead and do our gained EXP for our inactive monster. So now once we add support for multiple monsters, we'll have our logic in place, so then that way those monsters gain experience as well. Alright, so then real quick what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reset our data. So back in our preload scene, we'll go to our title scene, and then our monsters JSON file, we're just going to go ahead and reset our current attack and our current EXP. Alright, with that brings this video to an end. In our next video, we'll go ahead and start our next section, and this is going to be on handling multiple monsters in our party. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hit the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.